Thank you, Shayla, for being here with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Shayla has written contemporary, erotic, paranormal, and historical romance, and her books have sold over 1 million copies. And she's here today to talk about her latest, 1001 Dark Nights novella, Pure Wicked, part of the Wicked Lovers series. So before we jump into the next round of questions, can you give us a little kickoff and tell us a bit more about Pure Wicked? Can you hear me?
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry. Yeah, you cut out for a second.
Oh, not a problem. Can you tell us a little bit more about Pure Wicked
Oh,
and just get us up to
absolutely.
speed?
Sure. Um,
Sure.
yeah, I technology. It's great till it doesn't work, right? Um,
I
Pure
know,
Wicked
right?
is the newest novella in my Wicked Lover series. I've been really looking forward to writing about Jesse, who is a character I introduced back in book two, Decadent, and I was waiting for him to sort of, mature and ripen like a fine wine. He had a lot of growing up to do, so I was looking forward to kind of letting him percolate in the background and figuring out who he was as he grew up. Kind of in the limelight, but then, realizing that he needed to have a personal life beyond stardom and all the things that came with it. So it was great to see him mature and come into his own and find somebody who kind of really balanced him.
Yeah. It's interesting when a character is kind of in the background and you bring them on for something new. Was he the main inspiration for the Wicked Lover series, or were there some other, things that inspired you to start this?
Actually, the thing that inspired me to start the series was a friend I had years and years ago, and he was a very good friend of mine, and unfortunately, he passed away. And it was one of the
Mhm.
things that he was so impactful in my life in some ways, and he really inspired, just a good friend, and he was really inspiring. He was a good old Cajun boy, nicest guy you'd ever want to know. Had lots
That's
of
awesome.
secrets, an interesting side. So
Mhm.
it was sort of a tribute when somebody sent me a picture, and it reminded me of him in certain ways, and the whole thing just percolated in my head, and I was really happy when the idea hit me. It was the right idea at the right time, and it was kind of a tribute to me, from me to him, even though he couldn't be with us anymore.
Mhm. That's great. That's wonderful. Now, can anyone just jump right into Wicked Lovers? Is it standalone, or do you kind of have to go in order?
What I'll say is they're written in such a way that what you have is a series of continuing characters. So that, for instance, if you picked up in the middle of the series, you might not know the
Hmm.
past characters I'm talking about, but you'll absolutely be able to follow the story I'm telling you right now. So
Perfect.
with Pure Wicked, for instance, even if you hadn't read the book where I introduced Jesse, you would still be able to follow along and understand. I'm going to give you enough background in order to
Yeah.
figure out, who he is and where he's come from and how we got to this place. So absolutely, it's kind of more fun in some ways if you can follow along book by book because you'll
Yeah.
understand the supporting cast completely. But other than that, yeah, you could. They're standalone enough that you could jump in the middle and have fun.
Yeah. Now, we have a couple viewer questions. We have one from Carly, and she says, which character in this book would you say is the most relatable?
You know what? I think in some ways that I really enjoyed writing Bristol, Jesse's heroine, largely because
Yeah.
she she's kind of every girl who's ever been jilted by a guy who, um, is kind of standing there like wondering what happened, what went wrong, and then having to, especially living in a small town where then you have to be, you see these people constantly, and there's no
Yeah.
getting around it, and there's no getting away from them, and it's kind of that always in your face thing. So I
Yeah.
think for every girl who's ever kind of been jilted by some guy, which should be pretty much everybody.
Yeah. Right. Now, in speaking of Bristol, if you could fan cast her, and kind of match her up with any actress right now, who would you choose? Or is there no one that would be perfect for her?
I actually, starting Pure Wicked, I actually had a new way that I started writing the.
Hmm.
I had always written in Word, and I moved into a program called Scrivener, which allows you to create character profiles for everybody, including a picture. It's part of the template, actually. So
That's
I went out
awesome.
and I found the model of a picture that looked very much like Bristol in my head. I actually don't know her name, but I can see. It was great to just go Google somebody and find a picture. And I, in fact, am doing on October 22nd on my Facebook page. I'll be doing an online party about Pure Wicked, and I'll actually post my inspiration pictures. So if anybody wants to
Awesome.
see, what they look like, then I'll be, it'll all be there right then.
Excellent. Now, Jillian has a question. She says, how is Pure Wicked different from your other works? Hi, Jillian.
Hi, Jillian. I think Pure Wicked has, I've always written kind of darker, really dramatic and angsty books, and I really enjoy that kind of thing. But in a novella,
Yeah.
sometimes you want to give people a slice of life as opposed to, a big angst fest. So for me,
Yeah.
I wanted to write very much about this guy from a great big world with this gigantic career. Pretty much everybody on the planet knows who he is, and wanting to escape all of that after a tragedy,
Right.
and then finding this little town and this girl who lives in this fishbowl almost. And I loved the
Mhm.
idea of the ups and the downs of a small town. It's the
Yeah.
gossipy, grapevine-y, everybody knows everybody, but at the same time, it's also got that quaint kind of happy charm where, people will help people, and you've got, ties to friends and neighbors. And so I wanted to juxtapose all that into their, very rapid romance where it was the two of
Mhm.
them, and yet they had so many outside influences from this little tiny town that's, like I said,
Right.
it's got its own little Peyton Place thing going on.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it works great. I do love the kind of the juxtaposition. Um, Jillian has another question, which is great. She says, how does it feel to be A Thousand and One Dark Nights' first release and now have Pure Wicked?
It's actually so exciting in a couple of ways because the project has come so far, and the things that we do now, and the reach that we have now versus what we did when we first started. It's
Yeah,
been fantastic to see the growth, and I've loved being a continuing part of it, and I'm super happy and proud to continue on.
awesome. Thank you, Jillian. Um, now, in terms of Jesse, because we're talking about like, using Scrivener and the whole character development stuff, did you pull, he's a pop star in this. Did you pull from anyone, modern pop or rock stars? Was there anyone that you had in mind when you were creating him?
I not a person in terms of his actual career. I would say there's a reason that when he went to go see his ex fiance, who is of course now happily married, and that was the hero and the
Hmm.
heroine of book two. When he went to go see Deke and Kimber, and Deke answered the door, he turned around and looked at Kimber and said, "Your personal Bieber is here."
That's amazing.
Because I think it's
Fantastic.
it's very much that sort of screaming teenage girl, screaming a lot of girls.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
he just it's kind of that sort of global career where he really literally couldn't walk down the street without being recognized in his
Yeah.
full garb. Take all of that off, scale him back. And the interesting thing was I actually found an image of he's a country singer actually, but I found an image of him, long hair, kind of earrings, leathery thing going on, and then he stripped all that away, shaved his head. You would have never known it was the same person ever. I looked at that picture, I showed it to a bunch of people, and they're all like, "Really? That's the same dude?"
That's
Yep, same
awesome.
dude. It was actually
Wow.
fun to play with.
Yeah, that's neat. Now, what's your favorite scene between Jesse and Bristol? Without giving away too much, is there any, one particular scene that you love?
I actually had a whole lot of fun writing their you know, what is that term they use? The meet cute. I had fun with that because, you know, he jumped in to sort of save her from a very awkward social situation, and
Hmm.
she had no idea who he was, and her best friend had almost set her up for this, and so she's looking between the two of them like, did you have this worked out? And I just didn't know, like, where did this come from? But honestly, just having them, you know, sit down and pretend to be boyfriend and girlfriend in front of all her friends and family to avoid this sort of very strange and peculiar situation. It was really fun to get them, you know, playing as if they knew each other when
Hmm.
they really didn't, but it was a good way for them to get to know each other. And then I
Yeah.
also really had such a good time at the very end when he came back to see her and sing the song that he had written
Yeah.
for her. It was one of those things where I thought it was so full circle in a way for him because before he met her, he wasn't writing, he wasn't, you know, he was kind of going through the motions, and she actually made him think again and feel again and want to be in the moment, you know, with his music again.
Yeah. Um, Now I have something entirely, different from the character topic, which I just have to bring up because I love your Wicked Lovers covers. I think they're amazing. I love your Hunky Man covers, but even more so, just the suggestive, images of fruit and things drizzled with honey. I just love all of it. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Did you have any say in the covers? Like, I feel like there's a new trend in, romance and erotica, and you see this more. Why do you think these are so popular?
I actually had a lot to do with those. I I published, you know, the major novels, of course, with Berkeley, and at one point, some of the retailers came to them and said, "Hey, you know, we'd love to have these books, you know, on front tables or you know in Target or you know closer to the front of the store or whatever, but we can't really do that with the
Hmm.
old covers." So
Yeah.
Berkeley decided to go ahead and recover the whole series, and they were lovely to ask me, you know, what did I want. So they would
Hmm.
send me literally 15, 20 mock-ups of covers, and sometimes I would send them all back. But we would always find something, and I've actually been completely happy with what we've come up with so far. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the cover for the next book, which will be, not the next one, I'm sorry, 11, which will be out in July. I haven't even seen it yet, but I've asked for something slightly different.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really excited because you know they're all nice, and I'm not a big,
Hmm.
I like clench covers. I just think I'm not a huge proponent of, you know, covers where kind of I kind of say people are slobbering on each other, just because if you want to put them out on a store table, like people who come through with their kids, it's very difficult, and the retailers aren't
Yeah.
very happy. I personally like them in the sense that as a reader, yeah, they're sexy, but in terms of you know, reaching your readership wherever they want to find you, it's a more challenging thing. So coming up with covers that are pretty and evocative without being, you
Yeah.
know, over the top, that's kind of where
Exactly.
it's at.
Yeah. They're suggestive in a really creative way. It's really neat.
Right, right.
Nothing
Like the
sexier than
cover,
chocolate covered
yeah,
strawberries.
right. The cover for Ours to Love. You know, how do you get across the concept of of a menage without three people on the cover? You put
Right.
up three champagne glasses.
Yeah, it's perfect. Now, have you ever collaborated with any other authors? And what was that experience like?
I collaborate a lot actually because I'm a super social person. I know so many authors say that they're very introverted. That's just so not me. So you know, I find it hard to go get in my corner and stay there and you know not talk to people. It's just not who I am.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of collaborative series going on right now. Actually, three of them. Lexi Blake and I, who if you've not spent a lot of time with Lexi, she's crazy wonderful. And we write two series together now. First, we started the Masters of Menage series back in 2012, so we are getting ready to
Mhm.
release book 8 next year. And then we also write a new series called The Perfect Gentleman, and the first book of that was Scandal Never Sleeps, which launched last month. And we have another one coming out
Yes.
in January called Seduction in Session. Then I
Hmm.
also write another collaborative series with two other friends, Jenna Jacob and Isabella LaPearl, and it's called The Doms of Her Life, and it's kind of like our dungeon soap opera series. So it's very much a
Hmm.
continuing. You have to read the last installment to understand the current installment, and it's literally focused around three people and their lives. And as as we like to say, two doms, one woman. Let the games begin.
Great. Yeah, we had Lexi Blake on like few months ago, and she mentioned all that wonderful stuff. So yeah, she's great. Um, do you remember the day that you found out that you were going to get your work published for the very first time, or is it like a total blur?
No, I actually do remember. It was super long time ago, but I do remember. Yes, I was sitting. I still worked in corporate America. I was sitting in a meeting, and
Hmm.
I the meeting had paused for a second, and I ran out to my desk and listened to my voicemails, and there was a lovely voicemail from somebody who wanted to buy my work. So that was in May of 1998.
Wow. And it was during work. I'd be
Yeah,
like, what?
yeah,
Just like contain your excitement for a minute. That's awesome.
yeah. It was. I
Um,
had to walk back in there and act like, no, it's all good, nothing's happened.
we have some more questions from viewers. Elizabeth wants to know, what's your favorite book of all time? That's a tough one.
I'm actually not like the favorite person. I have to be super honest because I'm a
Yeah.
moody little thing, and so it just depends on what mood I'm in.
Yep.
Sometimes I want a sweet book. Sometimes I used to love reading. For instance, there was a historical author like eons ago, and her name was Laura London, and I think it was actually a husband-wife team. But some of the prose was so lush and beautiful, and the characters were amazing, and they would linger with you. There was almost no sex, but they were incredibly well crafted. I mean, and so lyrical. I could read them all day long. And it's one of the same reasons I actually loved Laverle Spencer before she retired. Very excruciatingly, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just precisely drawn characters. And,
Yeah.
not a lot happened in the plots, but the prose itself was so amazing. And the characters,
Yeah.
you could just feel the way they felt. And I loved those sorts of things. But I also really loved Tammy Hogue and J.R. Ward, and I read Harry Potter like 5 times. I mean, I'll read all kinds of things, so it just really depends on what mood
Absolutely.
I'm in.
Yeah. Now Diana has a question. She says, if you could change one thing in one of your books, what would it be? That's tough too.
Wow. Um, I honestly can't think of anything. I'm really one of those people who lingers and lingers and
Yeah.
lingers over it until I'm
Hmm.
happy with it. So I'm consistently in trouble with my editor because I'm always dabbling and picking, and I'm like, just another few days, just a week, just I'm getting it, I'm working it. I
There's
really
always
don't
a
like to
task
let it go
also that
until I
comes,
have
right?
to.
Yeah. Now, see, that's a good thing, and it's great that you pour over your covers too because they're so beautiful. So it's worth all of the process.
I want to love what I do. You
Liz,
spend a lot of time doing it.
yeah, exactly. You want to put everything into it. Liz
Absolutely.
Berry has a question
Of
for
course she
you.
does.
Hi, Liz. She says,
Hi, Liz.
"How were you able to write his song? It's so beautiful."
Thank you. I wrote it with ESPN in the background. Who knows? I mean, it was one of those things. I think I was so dialed in to how he felt and what he wanted to say to her. It took me a minute to
Hmm.
sort of get the cadence of how to write a song because honestly, I'd never tried to do it. But I
Yeah.
really enjoyed kind of the challenge. It's almost like a puzzle in a way. The brevity of
Hmm.
trying to make rhymes and stanzas and choruses and bridges, and I could sort of hear it in the background or in my head as I was
Yeah.
writing words, and I would stop and start. But I would say honestly, it took me about 15 minutes, and I just had to drown out the ESPN.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now, I know that you've done, you reissued some historical romances. Can you tell us a
Hmm.
little bit more about that? Did you do a lot of research for your historicals? Was it a different sort of process than the other stuff you've
Yeah,
done?
I actually did a lot of research when I was doing all the and I tackled a lot of different periods. I grew up with history. My mother was a history major. I love history, and so
Mhm.
I kind of always grew up with loving particularly British history. And so when I wanted to write historicals, because when I started reading and writing, that was like the genre. Everybody, historicals were it, and I loved them. I so I researched everything. I was a big fan of anything Regency, Victorian, Georgian, especially all the 19th century kind of time periods really interested me. I loved, and I actually wrote an entire series set, during the Wars of the Roses, just before and
Yeah.
just, yeah, at the end of it. It kind of strung along through about 5 or 6 years during that really tumultuous period, and I had so much fun just digging into everything from marriage customs and the way a knight would train and battles, the way I had. It was such a fun thing for me when they actually discovered, if you remember a couple years ago, the skeleton of Richard III in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote, for instance, the first book in the series, they knew, at the Battle of Bosworth that, of course, um, Richard had died, but they really didn't know what had happened to his body, and there was all kinds of speculation about whether it
Mhm.
had floated down the river or been buried somewhere, on the battlefield or whatever, and it had been a mystery for hundreds, of years, and all of a sudden, as they dig up a parking lot, they find his skeleton.
It
So it
is.
was
Yeah.
kind of nice to be able to go back in and add another postscript to the end of the book and say, hey, guess what? Now we know what happened.
Yeah. Now, in terms of where you started, with like what genre you started with, like what was the first thing that you were really into writing? And then, what was the progression sort of? Was it gradual, like a natural thing, or did you think, I should start, filling in this genre? It's hot right now, or was it just kind of like you going with the flow?
Um, I'll say this. So I started in historicals because that was, like I said, that was the genre of the time, and it was what I started reading,
Yeah.
and I loved them. And I spent about, um, let's see, I spent about 4 years writing them professionally. I did 9 of them, and
Hmm.
at that point, I had a very small child, and I had a corporate career still, and I took some time off when my editor got pregnant with her third baby and decided to leave the business. And
Hmm.
they reassigned me to a new editor, and we had some conversations, and I frankly didn't know. I just kind of felt like this wasn't my genre, and it sort of broke my heart a little bit because I really always
Yeah.
believed this was, the genre I was always going to write, but I just was feeling like it wasn't for me anymore, and I really didn't even know why. So I took some time off, about a
Hmm.
year and a half, and my agent at the time would call me periodically and say, what are you doing? And I would say nothing, and she would say, I know you too well. There's no way you're not doing anything. And so finally, I had to, say to her, okay, look, I'm reading a lot. I'm reading everything, and I literally read everything from YA to inspirational to category, and I stumbled on erotic, and I
Hmm.
found myself gravitating more and more and more in that direction, and
Yeah.
pretty much all kinds of sci-fi, erotic, the sci-fis and the space operas and the paranormal. I mean, like I would try anything that I wouldn't normally try, just because I was so interested. And this was probably 2001,
Yeah.
2002. So really, almost
Hmm.
nobody had heard of it. So when I sold Bound and Determined, finally, my agent called me one day and she said, "So, standard, what are you doing?" And I finally said, "Okay,
Hmm.
all right." So I've written like 3 chapters. I don't know if this is going anywhere, but I'm having fun with it. So here, you can read it. I don't even think there's a market for it, because at the time there really wasn't in New York. They had never
Yeah.
published an erotic, period, and this was probably
Right.
late 2003. No, it was early
Wow.
2004. I remember. So, and New York just had never touched this, had never even thought about, doing anything like this. It was something Aloris Cave did back then. And so
Yeah.
I sent it to my agent. She, read it that night, called me the next morning, said, I love this. I'm going to send this to Berkeley. I have a perfect editor. She sent it to them on a Wednesday. I think the next day I had, if you'll fix this and this, I want to look at it again. So I fixed this and that, sent it
Wow.
back. And the following week on a Thursday, they called me on a Friday with an offer.
Wow.
And I was so stunned because it was sort of I had the idea, like, let's blend something funny with something erotic. I thought that would be like almost like a really super sexy comedy, right? And I
Yeah.
thought, but I have no idea who would read this, but I'm entertained, so what the heck? And I did a few of
Yeah.
those, and that was the start of my Sexy Caper series. And then
Amazing.
after that, like I said, my dear friend had passed away, and another dear friend who also passed away sent me a picture of this guy, and I was like, I have to write about this guy. And so, my male friend just kept resonating in my head, and I kept thinking, I want to write a Cajun guy. So Jack Cole was born, and the series that I never really intended to be a series just kept growing, and here I am getting ready to start book 11.
Wow. What a
It's
journey.
funny how things work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of just things coming up in the future for you, are there any events or conferences or book signings that you want to tell us about? I know that you are active on your website and social media, so share with us too, like all the stuff that you posted. And oop, we might have lost her for a minute. Just hang tight for a sec. And we're talking with Shayla Black, the author of Pure Wicked, which is in the 1001 Dark Nights novella and is part of the Wicked Lovers series. I think she's coming back. Let's see. And we are here with Shayla Black. She just cut out for a minute. But we're already getting close to wrapping it up, so I just wanted to let everybody know that it's been great talking with Shayla, and please check out her latest 1001 Dark Nights novella, Pure Wicked. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.